In this Journey To video, we'll be looking at the journey to values-led leadership with our very good friend and educational lead at 1404 Performance, Derek People.
Thanks, Danny. So my journey to values-led leadership began some 32 years ago when I first qualified as a teacher. It's hard to imagine, I know, but in addition to those youthful good looks that you've just seen in the caricature there, it actually also shows me describing the trajectory of a drop goal. Now that's really significant, not because I qualified as, or indeed has ever been, a maths teacher, but it's because a drop goal, that drop goal, for me in my subsequent journey to become an educational leader, epitomises the high performance and desired outcome of the work of a highly effective team working under pressure. It's also highly significant because it's deliberately chosen from the world of sport and the behaviours and crucially the values that emerge from it. So in terms of my journey, the journey towards values-led leadership, let's go back even further. Let's go back 40 years. The runner in the front is me. It's February 1980, the South of England under-15 boys cross-country championships at Parliament Hill, Hampstead Heath, North London. For any of you who know anything about the sport of cross-country, it's the most iconic of venues, the mecca of the sport, its spiritual home. A tough mudder, if ever there was one, well before the concept had ever been conceived. And I'm about to be overtaken in the home straight after 3 miles of the hardest of slogs by that summer's English Schools 800 metre champion. I still remember his name now, David Hoynville. I was absolutely gutted. So why that photo to start? Well, firstly, at the age of 15, it captures what mattered most to me and what was most important to me at school. Sport was already a defining experience in my life. Preparation for it and seeking to perform at a relatively high level alongside balancing schoolwork gave an early sense of perspective. As well as organisational skills, although probably on reflection they were more those of my mum and dad balancing their work with feeding me and ferrying me to and from training after school every night. And secondly, in context, I think it taught me something about resilience, winning and more often, as in this case, losing with equanimity, and critically learning lessons from it. Together, consciously or unconsciously, I think these experiences were already shaping a vision for the purpose, the values and the culture of the schools, which in future I was going to be privileged to lead. And I guess also the attitudes and the behaviours of the teams that I would be fortunate enough to develop along the way in order to develop that vision. A vision for high performance in the context of rounded personal development and a breadth of opportunity for young people to flourish, whether that's, as it was for me, in sport or for others, the performing arts, creative expression, volunteering and so on. So I share this photo for 2 specific reasons. Firstly, when I was at my comprehensive school in Reading, my initial sense of recognition, and I guess therefore my sense of purpose, self-worth and confidence, came from sporting achievement rather than academic acknowledgement. That's a lesson I've taken forward as both a teacher and a leader. The somewhat grandiose Berks Stars were the top athletes chosen from the county schools back in 1979 to represent the Berkshire at that year's English Schools Track Championships. And they were, in many respects, a very high performing team. For example, the athlete at the end of the middle row is Jonathan Solly. He's 3 years older than me at the time. And 7 years after that photograph was taken, John went on to become the Commonwealth Games 10,000 metre champion at the Games in Edinburgh. That really was high performance. And if you're having a little look around the photo there, and I know you're all desperately trying to find out, I'm the rather coy looking one, just three down there from John, to the left of him. And secondly, if you look at the teachers in the front row, who are the team leaders, you can't fail to notice the rather imposing figure with a shock of dark hair and the black jacket. That's Doug Cook, whose PE career started at Park House School in 1959. Little could I have imagined as a 14-year-old looking down on him from that middle row, with, I guess, a mixture of awe and trepidation, that some 24 years later, I would be his employer when I took over as the head teacher at the school where he was still giving dedicated and selfless service. They say you never forget a truly great teacher. Okay, let's fast forward. This photo is from the Henley Standard. It's taken in October 1988. And it's 4 years into the start of my own teaching career at Gillett School in the town of Henley-on-Thames. It's taken just after the end of the Henley Half Marathon. The young man in the photo with me, and I'm the one on the left, by the way, is James. A fourth year in old money, that's year 10 now. And at the time, he was probably regarded as the most challenging young man in the school. A troubled young man, and a young man whose mother had sadly passed away the previous summer. But a young man whose one passion was running. When I arrived at the school as an NQT, I taught 19 periods of history and 1 lesson of PE, the latter to year 10, the fourth years. James was in both my GCSE history group and that PE lesson. And at the end of the first week, unpicking what he was finding so difficult to focus on in my lessons, we discussed our shared love of running and what it gave us. And we decided that we would set a joint challenge. Both of us were going to run the forthcoming half marathon in the town. And we pledged that we would raise money for a charity that would be identified by the students at the school. Now, I wrote him a training schedule, and it probably wouldn't be allowed these days. I actually took him on a couple of training runs around the school grounds immediately after school. And there we are, that's us. After the race, on a very wet Sunday morning, James finished in 90th place. The first junior athlete, and in fact at 15, the very youngest in the race, with a time that was one of the very best ever achieved for an athlete of his age. Now, that experience alone didn't define how James went on to refocus himself and all that he subsequently went on to achieve in his life. But as a new teacher, it confirmed in me a nascent belief which has gone on to shape my whole approach to school leadership ever since. Find a talent, a passion, a spark that ignites, or indeed reignites a young person. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't need to have anything to do with your subject. Just find it. And later, as a leader, ensure that you empower, encourage, and enable your teams to create those sparks for young people and capture a passion that enables them to fall in love, maybe even back in love with school, with life, and themselves.
That piece really resonates with me, Derek. I love that because it was, that part of my school life through my school career that I was really struggling as well. I was in year 2, year 8 now. Is that right?
That's right. You're 8 now.
And that's when my parents were splitting up, and that's when I took up running. Now, as we know, runners normally run towards a finish line. After many years of therapy, after going through my own mental health journey, it turned out I was actually running away, and I was kind of running away from what was happening at home. And it happened at that kind of those formative years at school where I was, settling and getting ready for a career. And it was kind of my running took off and almost did define how I went on in those later years. So I really resonate with this bit. I love it. It's brilliant.
Well, thank you. I think it is those moments, and you do look back on them, don't you, with that benefit of hindsight, that you think, yeah, I needed to capture that, or somebody needed to give me that sense of momentum. And whether it is, and that's absolutely fine, perhaps to escape at that moment, or whether it's to refocus, I think the point is that you make that connection, you make that personally, and it's in those moments, and they are defining moments, that go on to shape character, resilience, the sense of purpose, and we kind of revisit them. And I think that's really a critical point in terms of your role as a teacher and subsequently a leader, to identify what those are. The young person, perhaps sometimes it's even the young teacher, needs to seize that moment for themselves. But I think it's that identification and that perhaps steer, enabling them to take it forward for themselves. So thank you for that reflection.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really,
and it was that kind of that identification is how I was identifying as a runner at that point, and that's where I was getting my praise, my reward, my pat on the back, and all that kind of stuff that I wasn't necessarily getting at home. And my running club became my family as such, and my coach, young chap by the name of Dave Pullen, took me under his wing. So he's very, very similar to you in that age. And yeah, brilliant stuff. Love it.
Thank you. Great parallel, because I would absolutely agree. That first sense of, yeah, I can do this. This is something that I can succeed in. It makes me feel good. It makes me feel better. Is so important. It's as important now, isn't it? But in those formative years, I think it's really significant. So thanks. That's really sort of reinforced my thinking there. Thank you. So let's move forward. 4 years on from that powerful and resonant photograph, I think for both of us there, I was then appointed as head of history. I don't think I actually gave away at any point that, I think I said at the beginning, I wasn't a maths teacher. I was a history graduate, although obviously always had that passion for sport alongside it. I was appointed as head of history at Oxted School in Surrey, one of the very largest schools in the country. It has over 2,100 students on roll. And that was where the next stage of my learning journey was defined. And it was defined because I was working alongside a brilliant team of subject leaders to develop a creative, exciting and engaging approach to the study of history. We had 300 young people in the year group studying GCSE history, over 100 going on to do it in the sixth form. And I think for me, the real power of that phase of my development was around the work and achievement of the team together. It was about bringing that brilliantly talented group of individuals together and giving them a sense of purpose that maybe had been lacking before, that common vision, that sense of unity, that together we were bigger and better. And it was that work, and I was fortunate that as the leader to be identified to then contribute to the development of the History National Curriculum. At the time, it was the time in schools in the early 1990s when the national curriculum was first in place and other schools were looking for guidance. So I was able to provide some advice nationally and gain a profile as a subject advisor and indeed a textbook author. And it was actually the cumulative effect of the work of the team, and I will never ever forget that, the power of the team and how that team was built, that I think was critical in my subsequent promotion to my first headship some 6 years later. So I guess it's at that point where we arrive at senior leadership in school, headship. And paradoxically, at the same time, I revert very back to the beginning and those first photos, those first experiences, that first learning. Because my approach to school leadership continues to this day to be defined and shaped by those early experiences, those experiences in sport. The best book on leadership I've ever read comes from a sporting context. It's The Art of Captaincy by Mike Brearley. By his own admission, he was, in global terms, a pretty mediocre batsman. But at the same time, he was England's most successful ever captain. A man who was dubbed by Rodney Hogg, one of his Australian opponents, as having a degree in people. He was, in fact, a psychoanalyst. But he was able to get the best out of all of his team, including the absolute mavericks like Ian Botham, one of the most talented players of all time, but could be a very wayward genius. And who doesn't like working with a maverick genius? And what really achieved was not through systems or policies, although both of those, of course, matter, but by that empathetic understanding of the complementary strengths, the weaknesses, the motivation of the individuals that make up your team. That's really resonated with me. Or if I was to think more broadly about organisational culture, the ethos of the school, Legacy by James Kerr, a study of the factors which have made the All Blacks the most successful sporting team in history. Now, I particularly like in this his observation about sweeping the sheds of the changing rooms. It's the idea that you take collective responsibility, and no one in the team is too big or too important to take on their share of responsibility for the basic tasks that make the team function. Great learning from sporting contexts.
Derek, can I just jump in there, because the last two slides you've worked with, one was building that history team of great minds, and then now looking at the art of captaincy and leadership. And for me, I mean, the absolute sort of the pinnacle of everything we do at 1404 is creating high performance teams. And I think the magical word in that is team. It's, you know, you can bring together a group of brilliant individuals. You could have had a group of brilliant, you know, history leaders, or you, in the terms of the All Blacks, you know, you can have 15 brilliant rugby players out on the pitch, but if there's not something that unites them, then they will never deliver. And as a rugby man myself, there is something about watching the All Blacks, and it doesn't necessarily mean they're 15 better players than any other player in the world. There is just something that unites them.
Yeah, it's the blending of those complementary strengths, isn't it? And I think one of the other messages from Legacy is actually good people make great All Blacks. It's about their personal qualities that they bring. And of course, it's about skills, but it's how those blend together as part of the greater team. And there's that famous truism, isn't there, that there's no I in team. It is about how all of those complementary skills are brought together at critical moments. And I guess it's also about trust. And that's also where you have, I think, the really important piece that we explore around psychological safety. You have to know that the decisions that you are going to be making are actually supported by the team. And actually there's an element of risk-taking in that, but it's calculated and the members of the team understand why you're doing that. So I think there's a massive amount of learning from the dynamics of a team and how that team is then coordinated, how those strengths and indeed areas for development are identified so that you get the collective strength, the collective impact coming through.
I think that's really powerful, because it is, trust is the thing, trusting in your individuals to enable them to deliver, and to deliver in a way that moves everybody forward. And I think that's what great leadership is about, isn't it? It's about taking not only your business or your school or your team forward, but everybody with it. Everybody's part and joined of that same journey with the same goal, the same values, the same beliefs, all moving in the same direction.
Absolutely right. And it is that mutual trust. Clearly, that's underpinned by respect, but you are empowering as a leader those colleagues to take the responsibility. You trust them to deliver on those key moments. So let's develop that theme. Thank you for that, Danny, because as a school leader, I think I've just spoken about creativity and risk-taking. And I think that's something that I've really striven for as a leader. And And I think it's been looking as well about those really exciting, creative and thematic approaches to learning that excite and inspire teachers and learners together as part of the team. So we've got some examples here of a project I've always been particularly proud of, because it links my passion and love of sport and its provenance and its history with great learning. So we asked young people to identify iconic Olympic and Paralympic moments, but then to think about in a learning context, having done a little bit of a history about that in terms of the sporting context, but think about what artistic genre, what movement would best express those images, whether it's Ben Ainsley there on the crest of a Hokusai wave, or whether it's that amazing moment with Kathy Freeman as she's coming into the home straight, that iconic moment with the weight of the nation on her shoulders in Sydney in 2000. So these are now all around the school, reminding our students and our staff of high achievement, but also how they've created that through their work in coming together to produce these particular images. But it wouldn't be right in this particular context, Danny, if we didn't actually celebrate your moment there. And we were absolutely thrilled to be able to do an interpretation of your absolutely brilliant moment, your moment of celebration in Athens in 2004. It's actually in the style of an Austrian artist called Hundertwasser. And we were so privileged to be able to present that to you when you came along. Goodness me, I think it was 10 years ago now, on our prize giving evening when we give out our awards to our young people. And I always seek to use inspirational role models from the world of sport to really reinforce to our young people the whole process that have got you to that point. And I think one of the things that's so special, both clearly about that moment for you, but why we wanted to celebrate it at school, was we've always used amazing colleagues like yourself to both inspire at the start of a journey, but to make sure you're on that journey with the young people, check in on how they're going. And I think you said at the very beginning, the friendship that we've built over time, it's really come from how much you put back into the school there, and how we were able to build on that to have a really meaningful and deep impact on our young people. So it's great to have that on my office wall, because it's a brilliant reminder of what inspirational people do and continue to do for our young people.
And mine's still treasured at home, Derek. And I mean, that's why this journey, I've had my journey, you've been on your journey, Andy's been on his journey, 1404 has been on a journey, and it's now on another one in the world of education. And it's why it works so well together, working with yourself, because I've known you, as you mentioned, for well over 10 years now. And we both have that same passion about getting the best out of people, be it the students or be it the members of staff, or the entire team as a whole, really, because it's more than just the teaching staff that makes a school. But we love a quiz at 1404. With that photo up there now, sorry, I just wonder, anyone works out where 1404 performance comes from? Email us in at education@1404. There might even be a free pen in it for you.
We don't need to spot the difference there at all, do we? It's absolutely spot on. But I think just the one thing I take out of that as well is that's a relationship based on trust that's built over time. And we were emphasising that a little bit earlier on. And when you meet colleagues that you have that synergy with, you have that spark, you have that specialness, you know that's going to make a difference to others. You hope that's going to make a difference to others because of the value that adds. So a great moment of reflection there, and I'm so thrilled to have that on the wall. So I guess as we approach the end of my journey, one of the things that I'm proudest of, and we started with this idea of a values-led journey, is those values are absolutely central to the culture that's grown and developed in my school, Park House School, which I've been so proud and privileged to lead over the last 17 years. We have used the Olympic and the Paralympic values to shape our whole school ethos. We genuinely want our young people, our staff, at whatever level in the school, to live those values every day. They're our counterpoint, our base point. If we have to make tough decisions, if they're funding decisions, if they're decisions about the organisation of the day, whatever it is, we come back to those fundamental values, and they are so visible in our school in every respect. That's our main corridor. The wording that you see there, whether it's equality, whether it's excellence, whether it's inspiration, each one of those letters was made by a year 7 student in their first weeks in the school, in their textiles lesson. And we go around the school and we want to reinforce these powerful messages about these values and how they shape everything that they do, how they bring together the team. It's our counterpoint, it's what we come back to, and it's how we look to build high performance in the context of those values. And I'm hugely proud and privileged of what we've done together. I have the opportunity to then talk about this because I believe in different contexts, in different forums, that actually is a fundamentally powerful approach to learning, to team building, to organisational ethos, culture, and then ultimately achievement in a way that articulates this vision that started way back when I was 15, that I built through my teaching career, my subsequent leadership experience, and that's the University of Paris, a huge stage there, I'm a bit dwarfed by it, to actually talk about why this values-driven approach to learning, to leadership, to team building is actually sustainable, how it provides a legacy that will actually continue to drive that team forward in a context which is absolutely focused on high performance outcomes for young people as rounded individuals. Which really, I guess, brings me back full circle to that Jonny Wilkinson drop goal. At the very beginning, we saw the outcome. We saw the impact. We saw the result. But it was the result of a process. It was the result of the process of a team that had known each other, that had built up over time, that absolutely understood one another, their respective roles in arriving at that outcome. There were some uncontrollables there. They didn't know how the Australians were going to respond, but they had absolute belief and confidence and trust in one another, that the understanding that they built over time, that shared sense of purpose, was going to have that outcome, that impact. They were going to become the champions of the world. And I believe that's the mirror to what we need to think about in schools. Because I guess the learning from my journey is, in short, it's about common purpose and common culture that's developed together and shared by and lived by every member of the team. The coaches, the support staff, the forwards, the backs, whatever their particular role was in the team, they knew it, they understood it, and they knew what they wanted that outcome to be. And my goodness me, they delivered. So I guess for me, translating that into the current education climate, the currency, if you like, high performance in education is about the alignment of intent, of vision, with superbly planned implementation, teaching and learning for impact on young people. And that's going to be achieved by a synergy between behaviours, attitudes, language, and culture. All the ingredients of the 1404 high performance model as applied to our schools.
Derek, that was amazing. That was really good to follow that journey. And there's so many things that are similar to mine, especially the ones where we start with hair and we end up with not very much. But,
well, we said our journeys intertwined at various points.
This is it. This is it. Yeah. So thank you so much for sharing that. That was, really interesting. And if anybody's got any questions for Derek, you can always ping them over to him or to us at education@1404performance.com. If you haven't already done so, please give us a follow on all the social media channels to catch up with what we're up to. And we look forward to you joining us on your journey now through this education series. So get clicking on the next module, and we'll see you on the other side. Thank you.